The day Kaima brushed her fingers against a feared Korean Mafia boss, something inside him awakened. Something he believed was dead forever. Soft jazz drifted through the boutique like silk scarves caught in a gentle breeze. The scent of imported perfumes mingled with fresh leather and expensive fabric. Kaima stood behind the marble counter, her dark fingers dancing across an iPad as she reviewed the day's inventory. Her boutique, nestled in Seoul's most exclusive district, catered to clients who valued discretion as much as quality. The automatic doors slid open with a whisper. Every head in the shop turned. The two sales assistants froze mid-fold, fabric dangling from their trembling hands. Even the customer browsing cashmere scarves took 3 steps backward, her breath catching in her throat. Daehyun walked in like winter itself had taken human form. 6 feet of lean muscle wrapped in a custom black suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. His face was sharp angles and cold beauty, the kind that made people look away because staring felt dangerous. A thin scar traced his left eyebrow, disappearing into his hairline. His eyes swept the room with the calculated precision of a predator assessing prey. Kaima didn't flinch. She set down her iPad and moved toward him with the easy grace of someone who'd never learned to fear powerful men. Her burgundy dress hugged curves that would make a saint reconsider his vows, and her natural hair was styled in elegant twists that framed her face like a crown. "Welcome," she said, her voice warm honey with a hint of her Nigerian accent. "How can I help you today?" Daehyun's eyes flickered with something that might have been surprising. People didn't usually greet him with warmth. They greeted him with terror, with bowed heads and stuttered apologies for existing in his presence. "I need a suit," he said. His voice was deep, controlled, empty of inflection. "Of course. What's the occasion? Does it matter?" Kaima smiled and it was genuine, reaching her eyes. "It always matters. A suit for a wedding is different from a suit for business. Different fabric, different cut, different energy." Energy. He almost scoffed. But something about the way she looked at him, not through him, not around him, but directly at him like he was simply a customer, made him pause. "Business," he said finally. "Perfect. Let me show you something." She moved past him, and he caught the scent of cocoa butter and vanilla. She pulled several fabric samples from a display, spreading them across the counter with practiced ease. "These just arrived from Milan. The charcoal has subtle pinstripes that photograph beautifully, but the midnight blue has more presence in person." She reached for his wrist to guide his hand toward the fabric samples. Her fingers brushed his skin. Everything stopped. His body jolted like he'd been struck by lightning. Heat exploded in his groin, a violent rush of blood and sensation that he hadn't felt in 3 years. His manhood hardened with shocking speed, straining against his trousers with an urgency that bordered on pain. Daehyun's breath caught audibly. His eyes widened, pupils dilating as his entire body registered what was happening. The fabric samples blurred. The jazz music became distant static. All he could feel was the phantom warmth of her touch, and the impossible reaction of his body. It wasn't possible. The doctors had been clear. The nerve damage from the accident was permanent. He would never feel arousal again. They'd shown him charts, scans, medical terminology that all translated to the same cruel truth. That part of his life was over. Yet here he stood, harder than he'd been since before the crash, because a woman had touched his wrist. Kaima was still talking, something about thread count and Italian tailoring, but he couldn't hear her over the roaring in his ears. Panic clawed up his throat. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not now. Not with witnesses who would spread rumors through Seoul's underworld faster than bullets. "I have to go," he choked out. "Just a moment before we continue. Sweet listeners, tell me where you're watching from and please hit that like button and subscribe. It helps us keep bringing you beautiful stories every single day." He turned and walked toward the doors with rigid control, every step an exercise in discipline. His security detail, waiting outside, straightened in alarm as he burst through the entrance. "Sir, is there a problem? Should we drive?" Daehyun snapped, sliding into the back of his black Mercedes. Now. Behind him, through the boutique's glass windows, he could see Kaima standing with fabric samples still in her hands, her expression puzzled but not frightened. She tilted her head slightly, as if trying to solve an equation that didn't quite add up. The car pulled away from the curb, and Daehyun pressed his palm against his forehead, breathing hard. His body was still responding, still aching with a need he'd mourned as dead. His hands trembled. What the hell just happened? The penthouse was silent when he arrived. Daehyun dismissed his guards with a curt gesture and collapsed onto the leather sofa, his perfectly tailored suit suddenly feeling like a prison. He stared at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul's glittering skyline, but all he could see was her face. Those warm eyes, that gentle smile, the casual confidence of her touch. His phone buzzed. He ignored it. The memories came unbidden, forcing themselves through the walls he'd built. The accident. The Ferrari wrapped around a concrete barrier at 2 in the morning. The surgeries. The rehabilitation. And finally, the doctor's carefully neutral expression as he delivered the diagnosis. The nerve damage is extensive, Mr. Choi. While you've retained most functionality, there are certain responses that may be permanently affected. Arousal specifically requires complex neural pathways that were disrupted in the crash. Daehyun had sat in that sterile office and felt something inside him die. He'd built an empire on fear and respect, but he was still a man. And what kind of man couldn't even? He stood abruptly, crossing to the bar and pouring 3 fingers of whiskey. The burn down his throat did nothing to quiet his racing thoughts. She'd barely touched him. A brush of fingers. Nothing intentional, nothing sexual. Yet his body had responded with the intensity of a starving man given his first meal. He pulled out his phone and dialed his physician. Dr. Yoon. I need to see you. Tonight. There was a pause. Mr. Choi, it's nearly midnight. Can this wait until? No. 30 minutes later, Daehyun sat in the private medical office, explaining what had happened in careful clinical terms. Dr. Yoon listened, his expression growing increasingly skeptical. Mr. Choi, I understand you want this to be true, but the tests we've run over the past 3 years have been conclusive. The nerve pathways simply aren't there anymore. Then explain what happened today. The mind is powerful. Psychosomatic responses can feel very real. Perhaps you wanted to feel something so badly that your brain created the sensation. Daehyun's jaw tightened. I know the difference between imagination and reality, doctor. This was real. Without examining you at the time of the incident, I can't provide definitive answers. But I strongly caution against false hope. These things don't simply reverse themselves. Daehyun left the office with more questions than answers. As his car navigated the late-night streets, he found his thoughts drifting back to the boutique, to her, to the possibility that maybe, just maybe, something inside him wasn't as broken as he believed. 3 days passed like 3 years. Daehyun tried to focus on business. There were territories to manage, debts to collect, rivals to intimidate. His organization ran on his reputation, and that reputation required constant maintenance. But every meeting felt hollow. Every decision felt distant. His right-hand man Jinwoo noticed immediately. You're distracted, Jinwoo said during a strategy session. The Park brothers are moving on our dock operations, and you're staring at the wall. I'm thinking. About what? Because it's not about the parks, and it's not about business. Daehyun's silence was enough. That night he dreamed of her. Not sexual dreams, though his body certainly responded. He dreamed of her voice, that warm timbre that made everything sound like a secret shared between friends. He dreamed of her smile, genuine and unafraid. He dreamed of her fingers against his wrist, and woke up gasping, his sheets tangled and his body aching. On the 4th day he went back. He told himself it was to actually order the suit. He told himself he needed to confirm the experience, to prove to Dr. Yoon that it was real. He told himself a dozen lies as his driver pulled up to the boutique. The boutique was quieter this time. Only one sales assistant was visible, and she quickly made herself scarce when Daehyun entered. Kaima emerged from the back room, carrying a bolt of fabric. When she saw him, her face lit up with recognition. The mysterious customer returns, she said, setting down the fabric. I wondered if you'd come back. You left so quickly last time. I had an emergency. Must have been serious. You looked like you'd seen a ghost. She moved closer, and he forced himself to remain still. Did you want to continue where we left off? The blue would look stunning on you. Her proximity made his pulse quicken. He could smell that same vanilla and cocoa butter scent. His body was already responding, that familiar heat building low in his belly. "Why aren't you afraid of me?" he asked suddenly. Kaima blinked, surprised by the question. "Should I be? Most people are." "I'm not most people." She studied him with those perceptive eyes. "Besides, I've found that men who truly want to hurt you don't usually shop for expensive suits first." Despite everything, he almost smiled. "Almost. Shopping again? Or just visiting me?" she asked, her tone playful. The question hit closer to the truth than he wanted to admit. His hands trembled slightly, and he shoved them into his pockets. "You're shaking," she observed. "Are you cold? I can adjust the temperature." "I'm fine." "You don't look fine. You look like a man carrying the weight of Seoul on his shoulders." She gestured to a leather chair in the corner. "Sit. Let me make you tea." "I don't need." "I know you don't need it. I'm offering it anyway. Humor me." He found himself sitting, watching as she disappeared into the back room. Through the window he could see movement across the street. A black van, windows tinted. His instincts prickled. The Harpies. His rival organization had been probing his operations for months, looking for weaknesses. And here he was sitting in a boutique waiting for tea. Kaima returned with 2 delicate cups on a tray. She handed him one and settled into the chair opposite, crossing her legs with elegant ease. "So," she said, "are you going to tell me your name? Or should I keep calling you mysterious customer?" "Daehyun." "Kaima." She sipped her tea. "Now we're properly introduced. Was that so difficult? You talk to all your customers like this? Only the interesting ones who run away from fabric samples." He looked down at his cup. The tea was good, some kind of herbal blend that he couldn't identify. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, and he realized with some shock that he felt peaceful. When was the last time he'd felt peaceful? "Daehyun," she said softly, "what exactly are you afraid of?" His throat tightened. How did she do that? How did she see through 3 years of carefully constructed armor with a single question? "You wouldn't understand. Try me. I'm better at understanding than you might think." He met her eyes, and something in their depths made him want to tell her everything. About the accident. About the doctors. About 3 years of feeling like half a man. Of wondering if he'd ever feel truly alive again. But he couldn't. "Not yet. You speak to me like I'm not a monster," he said instead. Kaima set down her teacup. "Because you're not. You're just a man who's hurting." The word struck him like a physical blow. His walls, so carefully maintained, cracked. Not broken, but definitely fractured. He looked away, unable to hold her gaze. "The tea was good," he managed. "Thank you. Come back when you're ready to talk," she said. "About suits or anything else." He left without ordering anything, but this time he didn't run. As he settled into his car, he glanced back at the boutique. Kaima stood in the window, watching him leave with an expression that looked almost sad. Across the street, in the black van, 3 members of the Harpies observed the exchange with growing interest. "He keeps coming here," one muttered. "Alone. No security inside. That's not like Daehyun. He doesn't do anything alone. Whatever she is to him, she's making him weak. The boss will want to know about this." The days blurred together. Daehyun tried to maintain his routine, but everything felt off balance. Meetings with his lieutenants devolved into arguments. Shipments were delayed because he forgot to authorize payments. Territory disputes escalated because his responses were slow, uncertain. Jinwoo cornered him after a particularly disastrous negotiation. "What's happening to you?" Jinwoo demanded. "You just let the Kims walk all over us because you weren't paying attention." "The Kims? They're nothing, and you gave them concessions like we're the weak ones." "I'll handle it." "Will you? Because right now you're not handling anything. You're distracted, you're making mistakes, and people are noticing. This woman, whoever she is clouding your judgment." Daehyun's hand shot out, grabbing Jinwoo by the collar and slamming him against the wall. "Don't," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "Don't mention her again." Jinwoo's eyes widened, not with fear but with confirmation. "So it's true. You're compromised." Daehyun released him and stepped back, breathing hard. Jinwoo straightened his jacket, but his expression had shifted from anger to concern. Boss, I've been with you for 10 years. I've never seen you like this. If she matters to you, you need to either claim her properly or walk away. This middle ground is going to get you killed. The truth of it settled over Daehyun like a shroud. Jinwoo was right. In their world, weakness was death. And he was exhibiting weakness like a wound left open to infection. But he couldn't stay away. 2 nights later, he returned to the boutique after closing hours. The lights were dimmed, but he could see Kaima moving inside, organizing displays. He stood outside for several minutes watching her work, until she noticed him and smiled. She unlocked the door. Breaking and entering, she teased. Or are you finally ready for that suit fitting? I wanted to see you. The honesty of it surprised them both. Kaima's smile softened, becoming something more intimate, more real. Come in, she said. They sat in the same chairs as before, but this time there was no tea, no pretense. Just 2 people looking at each other in the dim light of an expensive boutique. I'm not a good man, Daehyun said. I never thought you were. Then why? Why do I treat you with kindness? She leaned forward, elbows on her knees. Because everyone deserves kindness, Daehyun. Even men who think they're monsters. Maybe especially them. You don't know what I've done. You're right. I don't. And maybe I don't want to know. What I do know is that you come here looking like you're carrying the world. And for some reason, I want to help lighten that load. He stood abruptly and crossed to the window, his back to her. You should stay away from me. I'm dangerous. So you keep saying. I mean it, Kaima. People around me get hurt. He heard her stand, heard her footsteps approaching. She stopped just behind him, close enough that he could feel her warmth but not quite touching. Then hurt me, she whispered. He turned and suddenly they were inches apart. Her eyes were luminous in the low light, searching his face for something he wasn't sure he could give. You don't mean that. Don't I? She reached up slowly, giving him time to pull away, and touched his face. Her fingers traced the scar above his eyebrow. You're so afraid of feeling anything. Why? Because feeling meant vulnerability. Because vulnerability meant weakness. Because weakness meant death. But he couldn't say any of that. So instead he stood frozen as she explored his face with gentle fingers, mapping the planes and angles like she was memorizing him. Kaima, he breathed. Yes. I should go. Should you? No. He shouldn't. He should stay right here in this moment forever, with her hands on his face and her warmth seeping into his cold bones. Outside, hidden in shadows, the harpies watched and planned. Tonight, their leader said into his phone. When he leaves, we'll take him in the street, show everyone that the great Daehyun bleeds like anyone else. Rain began to fall as Daehyun finally left the boutique. Heavy drops that turned the streets into rivers of reflected neon. He'd stayed too long, let his guard down too much. He knew it even as he stepped outside. The shadows moved. 5 men emerged from alleys and doorways, surrounding him in a loose circle. Daehyun recognized the tattoos on their necks. Harpies. Lost boys? He asked calmly. You're the one who's lost, Daehyun. Lost your edge, lost your focus. All for what? A woman. The first one attacked. Daehyun moved with the fluid precision of years of training. His elbow caught the attacker's jaw with a sickening crack. He pivoted, using the momentum to drive his knee into another man's ribs. Rain slicked the pavement, making footing treacherous, but he'd fought in worse conditions. A knife flashed in the streetlight. He dodged left but not fast enough. The blade sliced across his ribs, through his expensive shirt and into flesh. Pain exploded white-hot across his side. He grabbed the knife wielder's wrist, twisted until bones crunched, and sent the man sprawling. 2 down. 3 are still circling. Blood mixed with rain, making his shirt cling to his torso. His side screamed with each breath, but he couldn't stop moving. Another attacker lunged. Daehyun caught him with a vicious punch to the throat, dropping him instantly. The remaining 2 hesitated, realizing this wasn't going as planned. Tell your boss, Daehyun said, his voice ragged, that he'll need more than 5 men. They ran. Daehyun staggered, pressing his hand against his bleeding side. He should call his men. He should go to his private doctor. He should do a dozen sensible things that a careful crime boss would do. Instead, he turned back toward the boutique. Each step sent fresh agony through his torso. Rain plastered his hair to his forehead, mixed with blood from a cut above his eye he hadn't even noticed getting. By the time he reached her door, he was barely standing. He knocked. Kaima's face went from confusion to horror in an instant. "Oh my God, Daehyun!" She pulled him inside, locking the door behind them. Her hands fluttered over him, assessing damage without quite touching. "What happened? Who did this? Should I call the police?" "No police," he managed. "No hospitals. You're bleeding everywhere. I need you," he said, and the rawness in his voice stopped her cold. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. She took his hand, careful of his injuries, and led him to the back room where she kept a small office. She pulled out a first aid kit that looked surprisingly comprehensive. "Sit," she commanded. He obeyed. Her hands were steady as she helped him out of his ruined jacket and shirt. When she saw the full extent of his injuries, the knife wound across his ribs, the bruises already darkening on his torso, scars from the old accident that mapped his skin like a tragic atlas, she sucked in a breath. "Daehyun, I didn't know where else to go," he confessed. His voice cracked on the last word. Something in her expression softened impossibly further. She began cleaning the knife wound with careful efficiency, and though it must have hurt terribly, he barely flinched. The physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional rawness of this moment. "Why didn't you call your people?" she asked quietly. "You obviously have resources." "Because they would have asked questions. About why I was here. About you. And you don't want them knowing about me. I don't want them touching you." His hand shot out, gripping her wrist with desperate intensity. "Promise me. Promise you'll be careful. The people who did this, they're dangerous. So are you apparently." She glanced pointedly at his bloodied knuckles. "You didn't exactly lose that fight." "Kaima, I'm serious." "So am I." She finished bandaging his ribs and moved to clean the cut above his eye. "I'm not afraid of you, remember? And I'm not afraid of them either. You should be." "Well, I'm not. So you'll just have to protect me, won't you?" He smiled softly. Kaima cleaned the cut right above Daehyun's eye. Her fingers steady even though her heartbeat wasn't. She had treated injuries before, small cuts, accidental burns, once a fainting customer who hit his head, but nothing like this. Nothing involving a man whose presence practically crackled in the air around him. Daehyun sat quietly in the chair, shirt discarded and skin marked with bruises and old battle lines. Up close, nothing about him resembled the untouchable Mafia lord others whispered about. His breathing was shallow, controlled, too controlled, as if he refused to show even a flicker more pain than necessary. Kaima knew men like that, or at least she had seen them in movies on the streets back home, in stories told by friends. But seeing one like him sitting before her, exhausted and wounded, it unsettled her in a way she hadn't expected. She adjusted the bandage one more time, and her fingertips brushed his skin. Warm, tense, fighting something he didn't dare voice. His heartbeat kicked under her touch, fast and uneven. He didn't move away. She wasn't sure why that mattered, but it did. For a moment she studied him, the damp hair clinging to his forehead, the drops of rain sliding down the hard line of his jaw, the slight tremor in his arm he was trying to hide. He looked tired. Not physically alone, but tired in a deeper, quieter way, as if life had spent years grinding him down with no place to rest. No safe place. And then it struck her with a jolt. He came here, bleeding and vulnerable, and he came to her. Not to his men. Not to a private medic. Not to the shadows where powerful men usually hid. Her. Kaima swallowed, suddenly aware of the weight of his trust, even if he himself didn't say it out loud. She lifted her hand to push back a strand of hair stuck to his forehead. This time he leaned just a fraction into her touch. Not enough for someone else to notice, but enough for her to feel it. A warmth spread across her chest. She knew she should step back. Remind herself who he was. Remember the danger wrapped around this man's world like barbed wire. But in that small moment, with rainwater glittering on his eyelashes and silence humming between them, stepping back felt impossible. Her eyes drifted over him. Over the tension in his shoulders, The way he watched her like she was the only steady thing he could hold on to. And something inside her softened. Not out of pity. Not out of fear. Something else. She rested her hand gently on his cheek to check a cut along his jaw. His breath hitched, quiet, almost inaudible, but Kaima felt the sound all the way down to her bones. This man, feared by many, melted at the simplest touch. Her touch. A dangerous truth settled in her chest. She didn't want to move away. She didn't want to break the moment. She didn't want to pretend she didn't notice the way he looked at her. As if she was warm after years of cold. Daehyun exhaled shakily, and Kaima felt an answering flutter in her stomach. Something was shifting between them. Something fragile. Something neither of them was prepared for. And yet neither of them moved. Their faces were inches apart now. Her breath ghosted across his lips. His hand slid from her wrist to her waist, fingers spreading across the curve of her hip. She didn't pull away. Kaima, he whispered. Tell me to stop. Stop what? You haven't done anything yet. I'm going to. Then do it. The air between them became electric, charged with 3 weeks of tension and longing and desperate need. His other hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing across her cheekbone. She leaned into the touch like she'd been waiting for it forever. Her hand slid up his bare chest, careful of his injuries, until her fingers tangled in the wet hair at the nape of his neck. She was trembling, or maybe he was, or maybe they both were. Their foreheads touched. Their breaths merged. His lips parted. She tilted her head. The world narrowed to nothing but this moment, this woman, this impossible feeling of being fully, completely alive. Glass exploded inward as the boutique's front window shattered. Shards rained across the floor like deadly snow. Kaima screamed. Daehyun moved instantly, pushing her behind him despite his injuries. His entire demeanor shifted from vulnerable to lethal in a heartbeat. The wounded man disappeared, replaced by the cold killer everyone feared. Stay back, he ordered. Through the destroyed window he could see shadows moving. Not approaching yet, just watching. Making a statement. Someone had been watching them. Someone knew where he went, what he felt, who mattered to him. And just when Kaima thought Daehyun was finally safe. Just a moment before we go, sweet listeners, please hit that like button and subscribe, so we can keep bringing you beautiful stories every single day. Now tell me, what part of this story has captured your heart so far? And be honest, what would you do if a man like Daehyun walked into your shop? Let's have those comments. Thank you for watching.